So thanks for coming to our session today, titled Building a Modern Cloud Hosting Platform on VMware Cloud Foundation with vCloud Director. We're going to be covering some of the other concepts with VCD. So as you know VCD, hopefully you know VCD. How many here know VCD? You're in the right session then. Anybody here already have vCloud Foundation? Good. For those who aren't, you're also in the right session as well. So what I'm going to talk about today with Oni is exactly this. But we're going to be describing how we've built the Tieto and VMware Cloud. It's actually called
Tieto VMware Hybrid Cloud.
Tieto VMware Hybrid Cloud. Thanks, Oni. So Oni, why don't you introduce yourself and then...
Yeah, so Onni Rautanen, Technology Director for Tieto, working in the hybrid infra unit, responsible for our technology development and overall technology directions. So in this scope, I'm owning the vision and intent how the solution is working, and then VMware and Hugo is responsible on actually making it work.
Yeah, so Oni tells me what he'd like to do, and I'll tell him what you can't actually do yet, but something is coming, but let's see what we can do now. So this session covers some of those things. So I've been with VMware for quite a while now. I originally worked on vCloud Director Redwood version 1, and all the way up to what it is now. So we'll go into some of those things today. On and I, we're both based in, near Helsinki in Finland. So, but for my side, I work with a lot of the Nordic service providers, but I work with Tieto the most. So again, the disclaimer, you've seen this all week. I'm just going to skip it, okay? So today's agenda, just an introduction from Oni around Tieto, what we built, what the vision is, where Tieto is heading, how VMware and Tieto are working together. Then we're going to the detail, right? So this is a technical session, level 200, not level 400. So 200 is just after marketing, more architecture standpoint. Level 400 is deep dive technical. So for any of those of you who really want to go into the detail, just come and talk to me afterwards. I can show you some of the workflows that we've done in vRealize Orchestrator to work with ServiceNow. But in this session, I'll show you a few demos at the end. And let's get cracking then. So don't forget to fill out the survey, okay? So if you give me and Oni both 5s, next year we'll be back with a better session, more demos and so on. So please, actually just be honest with us. It helps us improve. So Oni, over to you.
All right. Yes. So let's open a bit on who we are. So currently Tieto is the leading Nordic software and services company. I'm working in the hybrid infra area of Tieto, which is responsible then for the infrastructure and cloud and PaaS and SaaS deliveries. These are kind of numbers for today, and actually now, starting from January, we are actually merging with another company in the Nordics, mainly based in Norway side, with Evry, and after which we will actually become the largest provider in all the Nordic countries. Then if we look a bit on our cloud strategy and how do we deliver services to our customers. As a managed service provider and a service provider, we need to look at this cloud mix in a way that there's no unique answer or one answer that how would you build from all of the hyperscalers, edge deployments and private deployments, one solution that fulfills all the demands. The answer that how and which components in this picture, for example, need to be in the customer solution is a unique combination for each customer's and each customer's demand. And looking at the kind of portfolio on a high level that we have in Tieto's hybrid infra, it's clear that we have all the kind of major ecosystems and cloud deliveries covered in the portfolio, but of course it's basically never an expectation that we would have any single customer that would actually use all of these. The kind of practical combination is that when we have these standardized and readily tested to be integrated solutions in our portfolio, we can then efficiently package the actual customer solution from the standard components. And here in the picture, in the middle layer, where we have the Tieto VMware Hybrid Cloud, which is harmonizing the delivery of our kind of private ERs across all the hyperscalers, our own data centers, and edge deployments. And looking at the overall cloud approach from our side, that when we do the solutioning for the customers in the modern days, even that we are ourselves a cloud provider, we need to actually look at the customer solutioning from the point of view that the first placement for the services is actually a public cloud. Because the reality is that in the public cloud, that's where all the new service development happens. So majority of the new features for new scenarios, they're primarily available there. So we need to kind of start the solution building there, see that if the solution can run there, in all likelihood, that's the kind of best place for the customer to get all the best benefits and the value. And then if there's kind of more security and location constraints, locality requirements, then we can kind of embed that first from our private cloud deliveries, and then even if there's more specific requirements to run on factories or specific edge locations, then we have also the ability to deliver the actual physical capacity anywhere in the world. Then looking at specifically the VMware solution in the previous slide we have Tieto VMware Hybrid Cloud, where we're kind of looking the delivery in a kind of hybrid multi-cloud approach, where we're harmonizing in the hybrid way the actual core level architecture on the bottom with VMware Cloud Foundation, so that we have one way of actually delivering the architecture and the capacity and the base functionalities. And then on the top level, we're harmonizing on vCloud Director to make the actual consumption layer for the customer to be unified, so that whatever type of service within the VMware context the customer is consuming, whether that's virtual machines or dedicated clusters or containers, they have one way of consuming that, including all then the extensions, backups, and all these add-on functionalities. They have one seamless way of consuming that. And then within that scope, they have also the multi-cloud approach that they can select if I want to deploy my workload now on Tieto's data centers, on the customer factory, or on a hyperscaler. They can all do that all from the same user interface and with the same workflows. Then looking a bit on the decisions that when we made the decision that we want to focus on Cloud Foundation and essentially harmonizing on vCloud Director on the top, with essentially in the initial stages with the packaged cloud provider pod deployment, we need to look at the reasonings for that on the kind of evolution of customer demand and how the kind of demand for a service provider has evolved during time. So first of all, looking at the customer demand, that is of course a thing that is exponentially growing. Whatever happens, that is always growing. Then if we look at the kind of our ability to deliver on those demands, that's something that if we look at the way that things have been done in the traditional way of working and in the kind of do-it-yourself everything way, that ability is starting to decline. And in the kind of thinking that we're kind of now in the intersection point, that if we continue in the old path, we will kind of start a significant gap between the capabilities and expectations. And then we have the way of doing things in the standard way. And now looking a bit on why this is. So of course, in the kind of beginning of time from our point of view, it all started from IT outsourcing. And that, of course, when more and more companies were starting to do outsourcing, that, of course, increased our demand, and through that, we had more volumes and more efficiency and all of that. So we were able to exceed the expectations. And of course, then the customers were expecting price erosion, and that was, of course, easily achievable because we had increased demand. And then when the public clouds started to mature, that had the effect that the customers' expectations were that I need the services immediately. There was no way to get any more into the state that, okay, yes, let's deliver the server in 4 weeks. That was completely out of scope. That it needed to be the same, that okay, few minutes and we're good to go. That's the only thing that can be done. And that's, of course, something that we were able to do, as that was just automating the things that we had been doing for a long time. So we already had a repeatable process that we just needed to invest in automation, which was, of course, it was not an issue. We just needed to invest a bit money, and it was okay. Then, when the other wave of kind of public cloud effect hit in, that was basically exponential addition of features, new features and functionalities coming into the solutions pretty much nearly daily. And that's, of course, something that in the way that we have been always developing services ourselves, that's something that we can do, but when in the kind of amount of people that we have for actual infrastructure development, the lead time for that kind of deliveries is more that, okay, we have a new feature, it's going to take us 6 to 12 months to get it done. And that's, of course, then colliding with the previous expectation of instant delivery time. So that brings us to the kind of intersection that now the kind of expectations and deliverables are then intertwined, so we need to look at new approaches. So when we get into the model that we start actually getting the functionalities and the features of the setup as a service, when they're kind of bundled into standard deliverables, that gets us to a point that we don't need to invest that much anymore into development, which of course increases or decreases our costs and gets us to a stage where we can actually create more new value add by moving the development from the infrastructure side into the actual value add services that increases then the customer value, and we get again to a point where we can start increasing the gap that we have on top of the customer expectations, that we can deliver more that is needed. Then looking a bit on overall how we're thinking about delivering and building x86 clouds. The baseline for all the deliveries, whether we're talking about public clouds or private clouds, is in the end automation, end-to-end automation for delivering physical hardware. So, of course, on the Tieto side, that's a combination of our networking and management and server delivery capabilities, and the similar automation has already been done by the public clouds on their sides. And on top of this, we can then harmonize the next level capabilities. Of course, on our side, as same as on hyperscale side, one scenario is that we just deliver plain servers right on top of the hypervisor. But that's not the main volume scenario and the topic that we're talking about right now. But the main topic here is basically on the VMware side, where we can then do a handover from the bare metal delivery into VMware Cloud Foundation level, where we have then the next level capabilities automated. And we have a seamless delivery capability, whether the kind of original capacity layer was sprung on from a private side or from public cloud, we have the same outcomes on the next level. And from that, we can then manifest next level customer deliverable services, whether that's then plain VCF with kind of dedicated vCenter capabilities, or then virtual machines, which is then manifested basically through the functionalities that is in VCD, which we are intending to also more and more automate with cloud provider pod, so that we have a full end-to-end automation to the way that how VCD itself is deployed and configured.
Cool. Should I do this one? Yep. So with the cloud deployment concept within Tieto is, as Oni mentioned, delivery across not just Tieto's data centers. So Tieto have a number of data centers in the Nordics, over 6, maybe more than that, a lot more, but I'm working with 6. And then Tieto also have the capability to deploy into bare metal as a service in Azure, for example. Tieto also run VMware Cloud on AWS as well. So the whole vision around being able to deploy this same infrastructure, right, across multiple clouds, either on-prem clouds or in hyperscale clouds, is this vCloud Foundation concept. So that's the baseline that will drive the consistent operational model across the multi-cloud landscape. So when I say multi-cloud, I actually mean multi-hybrid cloud, because the hybrid cloud concept brings in the vSphere, vSAN, NSX capabilities, plus vRealize operations and vRealize suite in VCF, including all the data operations. So that's quite important, because the graph that Oni was showing on one of the previous slides, Tieto, if we don't accelerate the data operations, for example, upgrading hosts, patching hosts, or with automation, you're going to have to spend a lot of time in administrators to patch those hosts manually before. So VCF gives that functionality, and that's why we chose VCF as that underlying base hypervisor, SDDC manager type of infrastructure. Next up is, of course, the cloud provider platform. All right, so the cloud provider platform includes all of these products that you see in here. So vRealize suites, vCloud availability, usage meter, and so on. However, there are many ways to deploy it, right? One of the most difficult ways is, of course, to deploy it manually. But what if you could use a tool that you can deploy that environment in a matter of hours, right? It takes some time to pre-configure, and I'll show you what I mean. But once you get all that done, all the pre-work, all the homework done, you press play, and it is a single-click deployment of the entire cloud provider platform.
And that's one of the key principles that we have in this whole architecture and solution, that we have end-to-end automation for delivering each of these layers. That we have, first of all, automation for running up and building up the solutions on first VCF and then the VCD layers. And then on the second side, we have also end-to-end automation for the configuration management capabilities, so that we get into a state that whatever we have anyways running on production, none of the configuration or anything has ever been manually configured. It has all been automation driven and kind of desired state type of configuration. Mm-hmm. So we know always what is in production, and we can at any time completely replicate the scenario that is running in production.
So that makes it a lot easier to upgrade and patch production environments, because we'll be upgrading in dev test, then in UAT or pre-prod, and then in the production data centers. So at the top level, right, we need some kind of tooling, some kind of portal that customers consume. So customers consume the cloud service, which delivers IaaS, which delivers bare metal services within Tieto data centers, and also will deliver PKS, Kubernetes, and SaaS services from Tieto. So Tieto have a portal called the Tieto Service Channel. It's a business process portal. So for example, if you were a project owner, let's just give you a name. Your name is Ben Business. You go in and you order a particular service. So when you press order, right, that contract gets set up, the SLAs, the OLAs get set up, and then ServiceNow will then talk to the underlying layers, VCD, vRealize Orchestrator, to automate the provisioning of everything underneath. And I mean the org VDCs in VCD, plus the workload domains and the clusters in VCF. So that's automated end to end. There is no Tieto administrator that goes in and does any clicks, okay? So ServiceNow drives all that. Just keep that in your mind. We'll be talking more about the, the process flow of how that works in a few slides on. So Tieto, we have many instances of vCloud Director to deploy, but it's not just the vCD appliance that we deploy. Of course, we deploy Cassandra, RabbitMQ, right? The NFS share. For those who put your hands up, you know the pain of how to do this. Yeah? So has anyone used the pod yet? Pod 1.5? Okay, not yet. Please look into it. So I'll just give you a brief overview very quickly. So as a cloud provider admin, I guess some of you are, you log into Partner Central and just type in a cloud provider pod or pod designer. So what pod designer does is it creates a configuration for your cloud. So you enter VLAN IDs and so on, host names. And then that data gets created, and the data that you send is then inputted into lots of documentation, right? You get a full documentation set, configuration guide, design guide, diagrams, and so on. Then you get this VRO package, okay? So this is what happens today. Oni and I have actually slightly changed the way this works in Tieto to drive the CI/CD automation side. So I'll go into that a little bit later. But if you were to do this today, this is what you get. So you download those packages, you get all the things sent to you over email as a zip, and you basically get an email with all of these documents. It's pretty much like a VCDX set of documents. Even if you don't intend to use pod to deploy a new cloud provider platform instance, you can actually input the current VCD environment that you have, and they'll give you documentation, right? So if your boss is chasing you for documents that you haven't done yet, just cheat and do this. It generates these documents in about 3 minutes. That's how I delivered your documentation, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the pod concept. Please take a look at that. So before I carry on, so VCF with VCD, right? To be honest with you, we don't have, coming from VMware, I work with the product management teams, pretty much, at least I call them once a day, because I complain that Oni is asking for something that you don't deliver. How can you accelerate something so I can help Tieto move on, right? It's not just Tieto, it's also other service providers like yourselves. So Pat's keynote yesterday, Cloud Director Services. Are you guys interested in that? So instead of building your own VCD instance, you leverage a VCD instance run by VMware, okay? Yes, it's good, but it's not available yet. So what do you do when you want to build VCD on-prem, right? You have to use build by hand or use the pod. Now, when it comes to deploying VCD with VCF, there are a number of ways for you to do this today, okay? So number one is, so when you download those configuration files, pod deploys a cloud management cluster by itself, right? It deploys another cluster outside of vCloud Foundation. Then what Cloud Foundation does, then you would use SDDC Manager to deploy the workload domains, so the provider VDCs. So additional clusters or another workload domain. So for those who don't know what a workload domain is, it's a VCF SDDC concept. It includes vSphere hosts, of course, and it includes vCenter NSX Manager, okay? So what happens then is VCD consumes those workload domains as PVDCs, right? And then from there, we create organization and org VDCs from those PVDCs, okay? So this is how you would do it if you had the pod deployment model. So this is what Oni and I have done. So what we've done is we use and leverage the management domain that gets provisioned by SDDC Manager. So the management domain in SDDC Manager construct is, just think of it as a management cluster where you run all of your management workloads, right? So what we're doing here is we build VCD on top of this management domain. We don't have another cluster just for cloud provider platform components. We put all of these VMs, so RabbitMQ, VCD appliances, inside the management domain of VCF. Again, we do the same deployment of provider VDCs from workload domains in SDDC Manager. I'm spitting out acronyms like there's no tomorrow, right? So I do apologize. But anyway, and then the same thing happens again. So what happens here is SDDC Manager provides day two operations for the management cluster, so upgrading vCenter, NSX. Other components that run in there include the vRealize suite. So if you're running VROps, vRealize Orchestrator, with VCD, right, which is what we are, you can use Lifecycle Manager from vCloud Foundation to do data operations for those components as well. All right. I have to tell you, Pod 1.5 today doesn't have day 2 ops on the VCD stuff, but that is coming on the roadmap. So that is coming, I would say, next year, pretty soon. Okay. And again, we then utilize PVDCs, and we create org VDCs from that. Okay. Now, I've customized the pod orchestrator workflows to basically deploy those workloads into the management domain. So just when you see it, you see that those workflows you can actually edit and customize and use it to your, to your liking. Okay, so moving on. Building a hybrid cloud with Tieto. This is what it looks like currently. We have these 3 regions in the Nordics, Sweden, Finland, and Norway. And we have that architecture deployed currently in Finland. Next year, Oni and I are going to carry on working. So he's going to work with Tieto internal teams, and I work with the Center of Excellence teams in VMware, our product management, and our professional services arm, to then go and use that same architecture, same deployment model, and deploy into the other 2 countries. And we're also deploying into the hyperscaler clouds as well. All right, so true multi-hybrid cloud with this architecture. And of course, we have tooling, okay? So it's not just infrastructure. What about services for Tieto's customers, right? And what about the capabilities to enable Tieto to move all of their virtual machines from their legacy clouds, the older clouds, into this new cloud environment, right? So the tooling that we're proposing and we have installed and tested and working is HCX and vCloud availability. Hands up if you understand when and how to use these tools in the service provider environment. Okay, so 2 people, 3, 4, awesome. Okay, so for the rest of the room, there is some key differences which I'll go in. So I won't go into in big detail, but those are the bullet points where you should use them.
And from a feature point of view for our delivery, the HCX is a key component to kind of make the mobility of the actual workloads between clouds happen. That we can tell to the customer that whether you're going to the public cloud or you want to test the public cloud, you can still deploy in the first phase, for example, the VMs in our data centers, and we can then flexibly get those transferred with the exact same configuration in the public cloud, and so that you're not locking yourself in to the specific cloud or specific location that you're making in the initial time.
Yeah. So that's one thing that I quite like working with Tieto, because they don't mind allowing their customers to consume a cloud that they don't own, for example, the infrastructure-wise. So for example, in VMware Cloud AWS or in Azure Bare Metal as a service, the ability for a customer to run their workloads or run hybrid applications across multiple clouds is key. It's about customer demand in the end, right? So choosing the right tool, I guess if you're using VCD and you do DR as a service between VCD instances, then VCAV is the tool for you. Also, VCAV enables self-service DR capabilities between clouds, right? So just let me go back. So the Tieto clouds at the bottom right, those we have VCAV and HCX in play between Norway, Sweden, and Finland, with multiple availability zones within those 3 regions as well. So we have those similar concepts. So we enable tenants to move and migrate if they want to, and so on. Okay, so let's go into the demo. bang on time. I wanted 30 minutes, so let's see if this works. So I do have a live demo, right? Because I like to live dangerously. But I also have a video, just in case. But for your entertainment, I'll do it live. But before I do that, let me take you through the demo walkthrough. I was just checking that my VM is still alive before we carry on. So what have we done so far? We've already built the vCloud Director instance with pod. It's running on vCloud Foundation, so I'm not going to do that here. It takes hours, not minutes, all right? So that's already built. So what we're going to do is provision a new customer. So what happens in there is, those things there. Ben Business, again, goes to Tieto Service Channel running in the SaaS instance of ServiceNow. He orders, hey, I'm a bakery and I need to open a new website, for example. I'm just taking things very, very low, down low. But those are not the typical Tieto customers, by the way. And he asks for a new organization, new org VDC, a new network, a new data center, and then his developer guy comes in and creates a nice website for that bakery. Okay?
As to now, the key differentiator here, if we compare it into the previous cloud deliveries and these kind of things that we have done, we have been more focusing on automating just one virtual machine delivery. And we have been proud of announcing that way back and kind of ahead of a lot of players that we were able to do virtual machine full deployment in 4 minutes. And now we're kind of looking at the same thing, that we're intending to do the whole cloud provisioning within the same time.
Yeah. So when I go through this, hopefully in the live demo, it does start and finish in about 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes, the whole end-to-end provisioning of a new data center, okay? And then the second one is Tieto already have automation to bring a virtual machine into managed service, so antivirus, backup, and so on. But my job is how do I get those agents, this BMC, BSA agent installed into the guest OS of that VM, all right? Out of bound, without networks. So basically, that VM is there, it doesn't have networking, how do I do it? So that's what we helped Tieto to do. So once we've delivered that, Tieto take over and do all of their automation for the actual VM that they manage. And the last one is Ben Business goes to the ServiceNow portal and he says, whoa, I don't want to have a shared capacity with other customers running in the VCD environment, right? I want a dedicated PVDC or I want a dedicated cluster. So we can do that with the automation workflows that we've created in here, all right? So let's go through what it looks like from a ServiceNow process. So this is the first customer subscription workflow on the Tieto VMware Hybrid Cloud. All right, so this workflow is, hope you're okay sharing your IP with everyone.
Yeah.
So what we do is we have at the top, Ben Business goes into ServiceNow, he orders capacity. What happens then? ServiceNow talks to the API of vRealize Orchestrator running in Tieto, right? And then that then creates the tenant. So it creates the organization. This is an object in VCD. I'm sure you all know what that is because you all put your hands up. And then we create the virtual data center. And you can see that the bottom layer, the second from the last, I'm going to try this now. Yes? So then this happens on VCD, okay? And then we go through and do edge gateway creation. We do a few operations on that gateway. We automate this end to end, right? And in the end, Ben Business gets an email, an alert. Hey, your organization is ready. Here's your endpoint, which is the URL tenant / whatever the customer is. Ben's Bakery. Wow. I'm surprised with myself because I just made that up on the spot. So Ben Bakery gets created, and then Eddie, who is his employee, comes in and builds a website, okay? So anyway, and let me take you through the second one, which is the vCloud Foundation. So this is where we integrate this with adding capacity. So what happens here? Again, Ben Business, his bakery grows, right? He's now a huge global company, and he doesn't want to have shared service with other customers in Tieto's cloud. He wants dedicated capacity. So he can go and request that from ServiceNow. Then ServiceNow again talks to VRO. And instead of going to VCD, right, we now go to vCloud Foundation. So we search for a free host in SDDC Manager. So these hosts need to be registered in SDDC Manager, but they're not currently in use, right? So they're idle. I won't go into licensing wise, but you don't have to pay for idle hosts on VCPP, right? And then from there, it provisions a new cluster, and the new PVD gets stood up into Ben's bakery organization.
So the part that this picture is now missing is, of course, then the integration towards the bare metal as a service delivery, towards which the ServiceNow is again the kind of information exchange point that first there's the physical servers provisioned in the bare metal as a service with ESXi installed, and then the information is provided to ServiceNow CMDB, from where the next level service VCF can then take over those hosts and inject them into a workload domain.
Yeah. Okay. So back to the demo. Okay, cool. Typical, it kicks me out just as when I start. So I'm logging into my administrator workstation running in Tieto. So we have Orchestrator here, and of course we also have leveraging a lot of the content library, service library within VCD, okay? For those who already run VCD, are any of you using service library with integration with vRealize Orchestrator? Okay, 2. Okay, I'd like to talk to you afterwards what you use it for. I'm really interested, yeah. So what we have here is with the VRO API and the VCD API, so VCD has 2 APIs, what we call the legacy API, and then the new cloud API based on Open API. So the Open API enables you to run these workflows, right, directly from another service. And of course, the other service that we are talking about here is ServiceNow. So whatever we present as a service library workflow in VCD can be consumed by anything, right? I'm logged in as a provider, so I'm logged in as a Tieto admin, because you don't want to give these workflows to your tenants, right? So a tenant should not be able to say, add resources, or they could, but they need to pay for it first. They should not be able to do provision a tenant. And the dangerous one that I haven't shown here is decommission a tenant, which is basically disabling the org VDC. 90 days later, it then deletes everything, right?
So all of these workflows are kind of exposed also to the customers, but they're exposed to ServiceNow, where the kind of business logic and approval workflows are appropriate.
Yeah. So these are always launched by ServiceNow, right? But just to save time and IP and disclosure, we're just going to use the functionality here. So let's provision a new tenant, okay? So as a service provider, right, you can do this here when you're logged in as a service provider, or when Ben Business logs into the ServiceNow, when he orders capacity, he orders a new service, this is what happens. So we click on execute, and then, for the demo purposes, I've put a few defaults in here. So the first is the customer name, right? I'm going to just call it Ben Bakery, just to keep consistency. And then the inputs here are basically input attributes in vRealize Orchestrator, all right? So, you can customize these, you can suit them to your service offering. For this demo, I've just used a simple pay-as-you-go model here. So you've got org network CIDR for the rooted network. So we create the networks here, we create the users, the Ben Business admin user, and then the developer, and so on. So when I click Finish here, vRel does its thing. So if you just look at that bottom tasks pane, if everything works well, it should just keep going, and then we'll see, we should see the organization being created. So Ben Bakery is here. I forgot to show you that it wasn't there, but trust me, it wasn't there. Now it's there. And here, it has no networks, right? So the next thing we're going to do is this creating the edge gateway. So now it's creating this Ben Bakery gateway, okay? And the gateway uses one direct external network to give Ben's Bakery access outside to the internet, for example, right? And that is protected and natted either through a direct internet connection on the gateway, or we're using in Tieto a dedicated service, VLAN for internet access, okay?
So this base automation is intended to give a similar experience as one gets when you onboard into a public cloud in the default way.
Yeah.
That of course then in the kind of next phases when we do actual customer network onboarding, we can do a lot of different type of network models and existing network onboardings.
Mm-hmm. So the networks will appear here shortly, but just to give you a sense of what happens here, let's take a look at vRealize Orchestrator. Use cases, provision a tenant. Here we've got, this one is the one we just launched, 12:09, because this is on Finland time, so we're an hour ahead. So here you can see it's going through convert network to distributed routing, right? And these are the workflows that that actual activity launches. So VRO integration with VCD is very, very powerful, and it's one of the best ways for you to enable these workflows to customize things not just from a service provider perspective, right? So provisioning a tenant, for example, creating capacity in VCF. Also, you can enable tenant operations, as Oni said as well. So now it's doing, it's done now, so yes. So it works. So here you can just see what happens, right? We take the name, we add org, we do the SLA, we add a VDC, we add a gateway, we add a customer network, add management networks, da-da-da-da-da. And it also has failure detection. So for example, if something happens, it rolls back and it deletes the whole provisioning process. So a Tieto admin doesn't have to go into VCD or vCenter and start cleaning stuff up, right? So let's take a look at this tenant that we just created, Ben's Bakery. So I'm in as Ben's Bakery. You can see the URL, Ben Bakery. So basically part of the automation, that URL gets sent to Ben. Here's your URL, and here's your user account and password. That is integrated into the Tieto LDAP, right? So we do the provisioning of the customer names and the accounts as well.
So actually the Ben doesn't get a username and a password as they use their existing account that they already used to provision the cloud.
That's right. So we take a look at the edges. For example, the services, we automate this as well. So we've got the allow outbound all, which isn't there, right? And we also have the NAT services. For example, we enable the source NATing from that routed network, 192.168.100, to the IP address of the edge gateway that gets assigned when we provision the edge gateway. So when we provision a VM into this environment, it can now go and talk to, you can ping 8.8.8.8 and so on. So that's the end-to-end provisioning. Networks-wise, we have this Tieto management network when we, for taking a virtual machine into Tieto management, and then we have this general network for internet access. So Ben can log in now, and then he can start provisioning virtual machines, or Eddie can log in, and he can start provisioning virtual machines. All right? Okay, next up, let's give you another nice demo. So Ben is here. I've provisioned another organization called VMware yesterday. And what I want to showcase is the use case where we launch a workflow to take a virtual machine into managed operations. So VCD is very good at doing services. So what happens if your customer has built an application and he says, all right, I'm ready for production, Tieto or whatever who you work with, take this application and manage it for me, run it for me, and so on, right? So managed services. So in the content library, we also have this enable VM management workflow. So what this does is it takes a virtual machine running in an Org VDC, right? And out of bound, we install the BMC BSA management agent. After that's installed, then it just appears into Tieto's ServiceNow as an object, and it becomes under management. So Tieto will then, clean it up with the agents, install additional agents, and so on. So let's see this in action. What happens? We execute this, and all we have to say is the VApp name, VM name, and UID, or you can do a drop-down menu. All the possibilities are there in VRO. But for the demo, I've just done VApp name because it's simple. And I've just named my VApp Windows, so I remember, right? So when I click Finish, that goes ahead and installs. Ooh, I'm too slow today. Sorry, let me go back here. Let me log in. So let me log in as Ben Business into the VMware thing. You see how much practice I've had on this, right? So this is Windows virtual machine. Let me show you. It shouldn't have the agent installed, right? So if I can be really quick and go in here. Come on. Let's hope it's not there yet. So apps and features. Yeah, so it's just got installed. Sorry, I wanted to show this not installed, but it's there, trust me. So if I install it, I can do it again. But no, I'm not going to do it. Okay, so let me show you the Linux version, which is, you can run any kind of command within a guest OS. Okay, so this time, let me do it right. So I'm going to open the Linux VM, show you that what I'm intending to do is not there, and then we'll do it again. Oops, sorry. Clear. So here for the Linux VM, let's just do a simple, tar command. So we're going to zip up a file, and then it will appear in the root directory. So again, as a provider, you can do this, through ServiceNow as an example in the library. We go to Service Library, and then we do this launch command in a Linux guest, right? And that Linux guest doesn't have to have any networking, because we do this through VMware tools. So we initiate the command through VMware tools, all right? And just to remember what the command is, we have this use case here, launch command in Linux. And I just need to take that command because I forgot to So all I'm doing is I'm just zipping up the root folder, right, and storing it as a TGZ. But of course, as a service provider, you can do anything with this, right? It's just an example that I'm using here. So when I click Finish, that then goes ahead and runs this workflow, this one. See, you saw it just kicked off, and the workflow looks like that. And in the actual VM, when I open it, you can see that it's busy doing that activity. And you can see that root folder content xxtgz is there. So, with management capabilities, we can now do that here. Okay. So the last one I want to show before I hand it back to Oni to close down the session is the use case where we provision capacity on VCF. So we have a section here with VCF, and then add resources. So if we look at the schema, it's, we create the cluster. So it talks to the vCloud Foundation SDDC Manager API, looks for some hosts, and basically creates the hosts, adds the hosts into the workload domain, creates a cluster, and then adds it to provider VDC. And again, we've also exposed it into here. Let me go here, in fact. Add resources here. So we've exposed it here because ServiceNow will talk to this. We're not presenting this to any tenants, obviously, right, from VCD. This is only in ServiceNow. So ServiceNow consumes this VRO workflow through the API. All right. And then when I execute this, basically it says, which workload domain, for example, number of hosts that you want to add, and then just name this PVDC. So this is adding a new cluster into an already existing workload domain in SDDC Manager. All right. Of course, we can add additional workflows or change the coding for the workflow to say, do you want to add a new workload domain, a new cluster? Do you want to add a host, for example? These things are very, very easy to do. Now, I'm not going to press finish because you know what happens if I do. Basically, provisioning of a new cluster gets done in vCloud Foundation in the back end, and then that ends up in VCD. So, and then to clean up, it will take me a couple of hours to do. So there's no reason for me to do that now. All right, so I'm just going to cancel that and hand it back to Oni with the presentation. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so overall, coming back to the kind of original intent. So all the activities that were now demonstrated, the main intent is that whether the customer is consuming the services from their edge deployment, from a hyperscaler or from a Tieto data center, they can consume it the same way. And also from us, from a kind of operational point of view, the capacity delivery for the actual solution is done the same way in all locations, so that we have a lot more efficiency on the actual operational level when we don't need to document deviations on different deployments, and we can just have one consistent way of working and way of delivering capacity. And as such, of course, as the delivery model for this is that the kind of business role from the customer is consuming the service primarily from ServiceNow, so that they're making the procurement actions that I want to consume a cloud from this location for this much, and then the actual consumption of the service is intended to be done by the technical user through VCD, so that they can use and consume all the capabilities that the cloud has, and we don't need to then do significant investments into adding new features, and we can, when we have end-to-end automation on all the layers, we can then reach new versions pretty much on the timeline that VMware announces them. The expectation is that we're targeting that on a GA date we would be live, but let's see how we achieve that.
Yeah. Yeah, so with the Cloud Director Service, for example, it doesn't stop you from deploying VCD in your own data centers, okay? Because that roadmap item is way, way, way further, right? And of course, the The first version is just being able to manage resources in VMware Cloud and AWS, right? So just carry on doing what you're doing with VCD deployments today. And if you want to leverage automation on the underlying vSphere SDDC layer, leverage vCloud Foundation to do that, right? And if you want to engage with me, I work in the cloud practice, so I cover service providers in the Nordics. I also actually part of a global team. So my team also works with lots of service providers around the world as well. I'm sure many of you have spoken to one of us on your travels. In terms of what's next for useful links, we published a VMware Cloud Director with vCloud Foundation for cloud providers. I didn't put the link on here, but the link will be on the slides when you download them next week. And there's a great blog by Daniel Pelusek, and he details the different architectures that you can utilize with VCD and VCD and VCF. And I think we're actually bang on time for questions. So fire away. Yes?
Is it possible to convert your manual installation to a vCloud Foundation installation?
The question is it possible to convert a manual installation to vCloud Foundation installation? No, unfortunately not. No. I can extend that with the pod on the roadmap for Cloud Provider Pod. If you're intending to do pod deployments manually today, VCD deployments manually, when the next versions of pod are available, it can actually take in a brownfield VCD Cloud Provider platform environment and then run data operations on that. Okay? But when you deploy VCF, a new workload domain, you can vMotion virtual machines from your old cluster to the new one. Right?
Yeah, and you can convert it in a way that when you first deploy a new one, then you lifecycle manage the VMs to the new one, then you can redeploy on the existing hosts the VCF.
So it's better to start over and do the deployment with VCF?
Well, yes, you can do VCF and then just vMotion your VMs into it, right? Yeah. Any other questions? One in the back? Billing?
Yes, so as all of the activities that are being provisioned in the solution will be populated as CMDB objects in our ServiceNow, then our ServiceNow is integrated into our billing process so that we utilize the CMDB updates that are coming into ServiceNow as the billing metric.
Yeah. So all of the objects that are created by vRealize Orchestrator, what we do is we take all of those objects. So they all have unique IDs in VCD, so in the VCD database, in the VCF database. All those items are populated in the CMDB. So the CMDB in ServiceNow is also, of course, multi-tenant aware, right? So we can actually do this billing integration. We also do ITSM integration as well. So for example, SLA management, event management, alert management, all these we utilize vRealize operations to monitor various metrics. CPU ready, IOPS, right? Storage capacity, and we report these into Tieto's ITSM systems, so that when a customer, you issue some kind of report at the end of the month, have I met my SLA to my customer? You can say, yes, I have, because we monitor these things and we send it up. And an extension from that is on the roadmap, we're trying to define how we can automate provisioning of additional VCF capacity into a cluster when we see things like CPU ready appear, right? So new hosts get added automatically. And when that contention goes down, we remove the host and put it back into the idle pool. So these are some of the things that we're working on as well.
Yeah, so the base kind of business logic ownership in the solution is on ServiceNow side, and then the VMware solution is providing metrics on all the data that is happening on that side to align.
Yeah.
Just a quick question about the VMware workflows.
Yes.
So just a quick question about the VMware workflows. Is that something developed in Tieto, or was that something you worked with VMware
COE. Yeah, so the question is the VRO workflows that we showed in the demo. So that was a joint effort between Tieto and VMware Professional Services. So we And the base of those workflows came from the cloud practice, so the team that I work with. So Benoit Serrachus, he's here somewhere in the event. So he helped us define the initial workflows. I worked on the architecture with Oni, and then PSO then delivered the actual productionization of those workflows. But we do have some sample code. If you want to catch up with me afterwards, I can point you to where that code is. For example, creating a tenant end-to-end. We have that, right? And we can also decommission the tenant as well. So I use decommissioning workflows in my lab all the time, because as you see, we create tenants, and I don't want to go in and delete. I just want to go delete, and it kills it, right? We don't do that in Tieto's cloud because of data compliance and things like that, but I can share these with you. Okay, I think we're up for time. So thanks very much, guys. Hope you enjoyed VMworld. See you next year.